Hello, my name is Radesh Malavescu. I'm a business coach and facilitator for leadership and management programs globally. And I'm here in my role as a business coach together with Alain Cardon. I like to introduce Alain, who is actually the mind, the brain behind the program, and also the person who created it. I'm working together with him for 14 years or so since I finished my coaching school with him. But Alain, tell us a few words about yourself.
Okay, well, very quickly, I'm a master certified coach, validated, recognized by the ICF, and the training we're proposing is also ICF validated. And I'm French, although I don't sound French. I live both in France and Romania when COVID allows me to travel. And yes, getting into retirement years, but still very active. And Haj is one of the people that wants to continue the work I've been doing. So we've been partnering for a while now on common programs with clients. And in the fundamentals, which is the subject, the systemic coaching fundamentals, that's the formal title, which is the subject today. Mostly to talk about actually manager coaches in the present context, the importance of management coaching. And I would say how this program is totally adapted for managers in companies today. Now, anything else you want to say as an introduction, Haj?
I think it's enough for the moment.
Okay, yeah.
Because I wanted to bring this idea that we're right now in well, I would say critical times, pandemic times. And I've heard in my conversations with my coaching clients or with managers, I'm quoting from a manager. She said, I realized that the virtual team is much less hierarchical, and I think, or I feel I'm less needed than I thought I was. So here is a question. Why has become the idea of a manager coach much more important right now? And what's the link, in a way, with what we're proposing?
Yeah, well, in a way, it's an old story because there's different levels of management, actually. There's management managers that manage people on location. And then there's distributed management when a manager has to follow people that are distributed all over a country or all over a continent, and they have to manage at a distance. And that level of management is much more delegative and much more, you have to have much more responsibility locally, and there's trust in this distance. So it's an old story, but today, thanks to COVID, lower level management, local managers have to learn how to jump that level and follow their personnel, their employees, their managers at a distance. In other words, with this other frame of reference, these people are all locally responsible and know how to do their stuff. So it's not control management anymore.
What I see is also that this is a big shift. It's a paradigm shift right now from the traditional top-down, king to his people type of management. That, in a way, yes, we could say that thanks to COVID, this changed rapidly towards a more horizontal, a more circular way of doing it. Some people read the theory about needing to delegate. Now, sometimes this is not enough and it's missing, right? So what can our program bring to this need for becoming a manager coach?
And there's something else that's important actually today is a number of companies are speeding towards work from home. Type of structure and way of organizing so that they can lower their expenses in terms of office space, etc. And it's really win-win because all the people who work from home gain 2 hours sometimes in terms of commuting to work. They spend less on gas, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the advantages of working from home are multiple. Now, today what's coming up is the main resistance to this is not from the people who work from home. It's from the managers who feel they're losing their grip on the people because they want to control. They want to have them in the same room. They don't have to do, distributed meetings on Zoom and so on. So the whole political dimension is what's, the resistance is based on. Actually, a lot of people are much more effective working from home because there isn't that political dimension. So they have to focus on results. There's a lot to gain from this. Okay, so that seems to be the main issue today in a lot of companies. If you want to really use the COVID as a turning point towards a different type of organizational structure, it needs to be accompanied to make it work, but it needs to be accompanied mostly with the managers, not by the people who work from home.
When I attended this program, I remember right now for the first time in like 2005, 2006, the first impact was on my management style, but I didn't realize it at the moment. So the practice of coaching conversations, which apparently had no connection with management in my head, created a different way of having conversations with my people. And actually the first thing that I did was asking more questions and listening more. This is what I realized at this moment, looking back right now.
And that comes to the definition of coaching, which is actually creating a space for the other person to develop and grow. Now, delegating management is exactly that. It's creating the space for the other people, the employee to grow, or my manager to grow. So all the coaching skills are actually delegating skills. And these skills are behaviors. It's not intellectual. I can tell somebody about it. He'll understand and agree, but he doesn't know how to do it. So learning skills is based on practice. There's a whole list of skills that needs to be practiced and practiced and practiced until they become natural. And that's what coaches do, but that's what managers can do. So actually there's a direct copy-paste possibility today of using systemic management, systemic coaching training and give it to managers as such, so that they learn the skills that have some complexity. They learn the strategy. They learn the politics involved in it. They learn the frame of reference. It's quite a complete shift in the way they will become. It's a cultural shift in the sense that a culture is behaviors, its beliefs, its ways of its ethics. It's a lot of things. Culture is not only a company culture. You need to understand everything that comes with a cultural shift. And so the training permits that kind of personal and collective cultural shift.
Who is this program for? So what type of participants did you had so far in the program?
Yeah, that's an important question, because this could also sound like a new idea or whatever. But in the last 15 years, as I said, in France and in Romania, and also internationally, we've been doing a program for coaches that has been attracting managers, entrepreneurs, and people from a lot of different professions. I mean, I had a number of doctors and dentists. I had a number of that have not only their expert skills, but that also have to manage clinics, their personnel, their help, etc. When they so they came to the coaching fundamentals course to become better professionals. Now, in a way, coming back to what you said, most managers today are promoted not because they're dilettantes, but because of their expertise in the field. So if you have a good IT person and you want to keep him, you promote him IT manager. But as a result, you're getting an expert in a management position, but he never learned management. So he starts doing all the work for the others. He starts micromanagement, managing. He starts overworking, but he doesn't have the management skills just because he was promoted into the position. He's actually an expert more than a manager. So the coaching fundamentals or the management coach approach actually develops the management dimension in those experts. They need to become managers today more than they are managing expertise.
One of the things that I think it's important and I found it really relevant is the practice itself. One of the examples is why so many managers are avoiding have the performance management conversations by the end of the year, because they don't have practice on that.
Yeah.
So they avoid it.
The practice dimension is really important in the fundamentals. Just to give an indication, there's a number of days of training, and of course it can sound like a lot, but it can go up to 8 or 9 days of training, depending on the depth of the course. But the fundamentals of coaching are 9 days. Now there's 2 days and a month in between, and 2 days, a month in between, 2 days and a month in between. So it's over 3 months. What happens, what we require is that the people practice with each other for the full month in between by calling each other and coaching each other and again and again. By using the skills we have, introduced on location days or on the Zoom days. So they have to practice and practice and practice with each other, and as managers and as employees. In other words, they bring their work issues and they get coached. So they see the advantage in the practice of the coaching, and they bring their real issues. So it's really practical. They work on their issues for 3 full months. And a lot of people actually change a lot of things in their lives by bringing the issues to coach practice and being coached on it. And they see the advantages of that type of conversation on themselves, because they're solving a lot of problems and advancing on a lot of projects. And on the other hand, as coaches, manager coaches, they're coaching other people to advance. So it's a very, very dynamic course.
Yeah. From your point of view, what is the difference, or is there any difference between the virtual and the face-to-face sessions? Because you run a lot of face-to-face, and then this is a virtual one. And some people might have a question here.
Well, there are obviously a lot of differences, and I can list them and so on. But actually, the main point is that if we do it on Zoom, they'll understand how to work with Zoom, because they'll be doing it on Zoom. And they'll be living through the kind of operating procedures on Zoom that they need to understand and practice. A lot of people who during the COVID had to go on Zoom or equivalent, they just kind of copy-pasted all the mistakes they do when they're in the same room in a normal meeting. They see that some things can't happen, but they try and do it anyways. For instance, I don't know, people have a tendency when they're in the same room to have a conversation with their neighbor. On Zoom, they may be tempted while somebody is speaking to start using the side conversation by typing things while somebody else is speaking. So they're trying to put into Zoom their dysfunctional practices that they do in the same meeting. In Zoom, they may get on their phone much more easily, or they may start doing their mail and stuff like that. They drop out of the meeting. Some people even turn off the picture. They turn off the sound. So Actually, working on Zoom in organizations needs to be based on a certain number of operating procedures to have an effective meeting. Now, in most companies, actually, meeting operating procedures are never really covered. People come late, they do other things, and then meetings become ineffective. This has never been really worked. Okay? Now, coming on Zoom, for a lot of companies, it doesn't make it easier. They actually make it worse. So if the training is on Zoom, they will also understand the whole Zoom issue and how to work with Zoom and the advantages of Zoom. There's a number of advantages. One of them, for instance, is if you have a screen with everybody, you can simultaneously see everybody. When you're in a room, you don't see the people on the side, you only see the people in front. And you tend to polarize. So there's a ping pong between people that are face to face, and often they sit in a room face to face to have that ping pong, that kind of competitive stance with each other. In Zoom, it's much more difficult because actually everybody sees everybody and everybody feels addressed directly.
Yeah, and it's kind of your equal there, because I mean, you don't have like a golden frame on your Zoom appearance. Yeah, but one thing that I noticed is that also we are learning also a kind of an etiquette. So it means it's a virtual etiquette that we have, and we never learn. I mean, and this is something that I heard, for example, people saying, but you know, in a virtual setup, we're missing the socializing, the personal part, which actually is not as much more focused on results. Then you can be socializing later on. So actually, it's in a way, I think the virtual setup is helping people be more focused on providing results, and then you save time for socializing later. So you don't do both. Now, what I see is that in a face-to-face, of course, you are much more closer to a person, for example, which has its own benefits. But the question is, if you're required to work more over the phone or virtual, then the best way to practice it is to use that virtual setup. It's training continuously.
Now, to come to the benefits, actually, on Zoom, what we see is meetings are more effective, people are more on time, they're more focused on results, there's much less politics, there's much less relational games and power plays, and that may be one of the reasons why people, want to go back to the office. Most of the people that are power game people, players, politicians, and so on, want to get back to office meetings because on Zoom they can't do it. It shows too much. They want to get back to the old and effective culture. Actually, most companies see that work from home is much more effective than work from the office. There's a lot to be gained there. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean you have to eliminate all the social dimension. There could be meetings in the office for the social dimension, but not for work. Yeah. And in our work, actually, very often we have our after work at Zoom. So when the meeting is over, the people who can stay, and it gets on a much more social level, and we have that space. It's necessary. It's useful for the people who want it. It's,
there is less reasons to be afraid of the virtual setup in learning, and it's also this design that we have on a virtual. It's not a webinar when it's one talking head and everybody's listening, but it's actually active participation throughout the whole day. I mean, we're staying 7 hours continuously, well, not continuously, but with breaks on the Zoom, which usually is not happening in a normal training, and people are okay where they're not feeling tired because they are focused on what they work.
Very precisely. I mean, the rhythm is we, give some instructions in the large group on Zoom, and then we set up meeting rooms and people work by threes to practice.
Yeah.
And then they come back and we debrief, and then they go back and work by threes. So that large group, small group, large group, small group work is much more, demands much more commitment. People participate a lot, and actually they don't see the day go by. So it also gives indications of on how to have meetings differently, because if people are not active, then they get tired. Zoom is a long time to listen to one person speak all day, or to present PowerPoints, or to do the old stuff that was happening in meetings and that was not very effective.
Yeah.
So meetings have to be redesigned. That's obvious. And that's what we illustrate during the training. So there's two levels of training. One is learning the skills as manager coaches, and the other one is learning how to work on Zoom in a very effective way, so they'll be able to do it with their personnel and their managers.
Yeah. Alain, I have a question which is coach related. Now, because I had this conversation with a coach recently telling me, but I went through a coaching school, or I got some coaching preparation. And I'd like to learn what is all about this systemic fundamental dimension. We didn't talk about the systemic dimension, which is setting this program apart from others and this approach.
Now, there are two things actually set the program apart. I mean, there's a systemic dimension, which is a much more strategic approach to everything in life. Yeah. In other words, it's recognizing patterns, integrating external influences. It's not psychological based. A lot of the coaching are psychological based. They even bring psychological profiles in coaching, with MBTI and so on and so forth. Systemic coaching is more about interfacing with other people and communication skills focused on achieving results together. Mm-hmm. So it's more an interactive approach, we could say. In systems approach, people look more at what's happening between people than at what's happening within people. So it's not a psychological approach, my profile, and so on, which makes it much more practical, because people, when you say you need to change this in your behavior, they say, well, it's my personality. And that's a mix. In other words, personality is not behavior. Behavior can be learned. It's like learning how to play tennis or having a better backhand or a better service. It takes practice. No matter your type of personality, you can learn how to have a better service. That's behavior. So in the fundamentals, we're talking about behavioral skills. Just learn them, do them, learn them, do it. It's like practicing, piano. Anybody can learn if you practice. So that's the approach. It's totally different from a lot of other coaching schools. The second difference is we're totally practice oriented. Okay, it's a behavioral approach, so you learn it by doing. Sometimes, I talk about it as a skill and say practice it, and somebody says, why should I do it? Well, what's the logic behind it? Well, we can explain the logic, but basically the answer is do it 50 times and you'll understand why, because you'll see the result. You don't see the result of something you haven't done. Why should I learn how to swim? Well, learn how to swim and you'll, or why should I do this movement when I'm learning how to swim? Well, do it 100 times and you'll know why you're doing it. So actually learning is behavioral more than intellectual. Yeah. The question why disappears when you've done it and you see the value in it and you see the results from it. Mm-hmm. So we're very behavioral in our approach. If you take it further and go to training and just listen to somebody talk about what he read, it's the same thing. Yeah. It even goes to learning how to use, a computer. I could explain to somebody here, and within 10 minutes, he'll forget half of what I explained because it's too much. I could just give the keyboard to the person and say, okay, start, pushing some keys and see what happens, and accompanying the person's behavior with the keyboard and asking questions. And that would be a coaching approach to learning by having the person doing it. Now, this is what happens actually in apprenticeship, which is very different from training. When you train an apprentice, you put him on the machine and you have him do it while you're observing and sort of guiding him. It's closer to mentorship. Most training in organizations is the complete opposite. I mean, you have a trainer talking all the time and showing PowerPoints. You have a few illustrations with demonstrations, and then the guys leave, but they haven't trained on the machine. And the machine is them, actually. They need to do it and do it and do it and do it.
Yeah.
It's an apprenticeship, actually, more than a training.
The techniques that people are learning through this program are not basic techniques, are rather more advanced techniques. And I'm curious, why did you choose this approach?
Well, that's a basic coaching philosophy. In other words, to train coaches, you need to use the coaching philosophy. Now, the coaching philosophy is people are capable. They're adults. They're intelligent. They can go fast. Okay, so a lot of the training from other models is you need to start with beginners, and train beginners, and then so if it's skiing, I'll teach somebody to snowplow first, and then the second level is I'll say, oh, you must get over the snowplowing because that's just for beginners. And so you keep people hostage, teaching them things that they'll need to drop. The fundamentals of systemic coaching for me is not for beginners. It's not a beginner's course. In other words, it's based on the core of what you need to do from the beginning. So I teach people, if it's skiing, immediate parallel skiing, immediately on some steep slopes. And of course, they'll make mistakes, but they will adapt much faster to doing things right from the beginning. So it's a very short course, but to give an illustration, the same course actually welcomes beginning people who want to pass ACC, first level coaching. The same course welcomes ACC that wants to become professional coach, and the same course welcomes people who are professionals and want to become masters. And if I went all the way, I've had in the course some master coaches. In other words, they are considered totally professional and even capable of doing magic, but they come to the course almost like they come back to an exercise room, if you're a high-level sports person, to work on specific muscles. Because no matter your level of competency, you always need to come back to the fundamentals and refocus on the core of the business. Okay? So that one course actually does the whole scope based on the fundamentals. With this fundamentals course, you don't need to know more as a coach. You don't need other skills, basically. But you need to know how to use those very, very well. So you need to train them for thousands of hours. What makes an excellent coach is actually he's been practicing for 10,000 hours. He's with clients.
Yeah.
A beginning coach has 100 hours with clients. Between 100 and 10,000, there's a world. It's almost like airline pilots. Yeah. I mean, excellent captains have 10 to 15,000 hours of flight. That's the difference. It's not warming benches in the school. It's practice that makes professionalism. I'd like to say something else, actually, which is an experience that goes a little bit beyond. The course, as we're proposing it, is an open course from people that come from different companies, managers that want to train. and learn how to manage at a distance and so on. Now, the course is also with a lot of practice between the participants, and that sort of creates a community of learning between participants. Now, this course has been implemented within large companies and at top levels, including the CEO. It has been implemented in ONGs across countries with people that work in the ONG, in the administration, and so on. And the result is the building of that community in the course around ways of doing actually affects the company culture much faster. Okay? So if you do this course within a company, with managers that work together, you're actually also, through the course, creating community links of managers that coach each other all the time. This has even been done with CEOs in the course that coach people and get coached by their people, their managers. And so it has served to completely transform internal cultures. If you get the top 50 people in your organization to go through the course in 2 or 3 courses, we can do up to 20, 25 people in one course because it's based on practice. Now, probably the best number is 21. So with 3 courses in-house, you get to 63 people. If a company's top layers are in that community and have done that shift of culture, this affects the company in a way you cannot believe. It is really transformational in terms of company culture, and it has an effect on all the people that those 60 manage. Yeah. So if everybody manages 10 others, that's more than 600 people in the company that are affected. So that becomes, another dimension about, it's a more strategic internal dimension for this kind of course.
It's a cultural change approach, actually.
Yeah.
It's a really hands-on cultural change. It's not a theoretical cultural change. I mean, I've witnessed that. And I myself, I work with a client where I was a consultant and I, in a way, failed to help the clients, change the culture. Because at that moment, I was using a big report with hundreds of pages that everybody was scared about, but there was nothing practical. At that moment, I didn't know about the program. And there was nothing practical. But this one is actually changing the culture because people change the mindset. So
and the behaviors. Culture is the set of behaviors.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So if you change behaviors, people learn the behaviors. It's no big deal, and they do the behaviors.
Yeah.
But as a result, it changes the interfaces, the result, and so on and so forth. And gradually, you see the culture has changed because you don't do the same thing anymore.
Right.
So it's cultural modification through behavioral modification. And if you get a mass of people, that's what I was talking about, to start doing it, then other people start copying and pasting. They don't understand, but they do what they see other people do. And that's company culture, actually. As soon as somebody comes in a company, he starts copying the behaviors. So if everybody goes late to meetings, well, they come late too. It's part of the culture. It's the behavior. They look at how people spend time in meeting, they start doing it too. It's the culture. It's never said, actually. Most cultural traits are repeated behaviors.
Right.
They're not principles. They're repeated behaviors.
Exactly.